This tutorial is for homework number 9. For the first section, you're asked to solve each equation for the letter x. For the first question, you have negative 5x on the left side, and you have multiple x terms on the right side. When x's are on different sides, you cannot combine. But when x's are on the same side, you can combine. So over here, I have 2 x's, and I'm going to add 3 more x's. So to simplify the right side, I'm going to combine these 2 x's to get 5x, and the minus 20 will go at the end. Now you'll notice here I have similar x terms, but they are not exactly the same. So I do not have a special solution. I'm going to add 5x on the left and the right, leaving me with 10 x's on the right and no more x's on the left. Because the left side of my sentence only has constants, I want this constant to go over there. But in order to do that, I have to use an inverse operation. Now that I have my coefficient and variable only on one side, I can divide both sides by 10, leaving me with the final answer of 2.5. In order to check to see if your answer is right, you can use a calculator and erase and replace your letter x with your found value. You're going to do it both on the left and on the right sides. Once you have inserted your check step number, 2.5, you're going to compute using a calculator. So using my handheld calculator, I'm going to type exactly what I see here on the paper into my calculator. -5, parentheses 2.5, close parentheses, plus 5. I'm going to press enter. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the expressions on the right. 2 parentheses 2.5 minus 20 plus 3 parentheses 2.5. And if I also get a -7.5, then that means that my answer checks. Let's take a look now at question number 2. In question number 2, I have a variable term here, and I have a constant term there. And on the right side, I just have constants. So I'm going to use an inverse operation to get my constants on the same side. When I rewrite, I'll be left with x divided by 4 is equal to 4. The inverse of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4 here, and multiplying by 4 and dividing by 4 are inverses. So there's nothing to compute on the left. Last problem. This one has parentheses, and I need to distribute. 3.6 times x is 3.6x. 3.6 times 4 is, let's take a look, 14.4. Now what I need to do is get my x's together on the same side. You'll notice the left side has 2 items, 2 terms, and the right side only has 1. So I want to remove one of the terms on the left side. Since the right side has variables, that means I'm going to move my variable term. Rewrite and compute. Divide both sides by the coefficient and determine your final answer. You should take the time to perform a check step for each of these other questions. I'm going to move on to question number 4. You'll notice here that I have a left side, and a right side that are exactly the same. Anytime you have the same variable and the same constant, you have a special solution. And when it's a perfect match like this, it's infinite solutions. For number 5, I do not have a perfect match. There aren't even x's on both sides. So I'm going to subtract 8 to isolate my variable term. I'm going to divide by 2 to clear my coefficient. And now I've solved for x. For question number 6, just like previously on number 4, I have matching variable terms. But you'll notice my constants are not the same. As long as you have matching variable terms, you're allowed to jump to the special solution answer. In this case, there are no solutions. But if you'd like to prove that it is a false statement, you could perform some inverse operations here like this, in which you get the statement that 5 is equal to -7, which is false. Therefore, there are no solutions. Sometimes students don't subtract the variable on both sides, and they choose to move the constants, something like this. And then when they rewrite, they then move the variable term. And be very careful here. This is not m. If you have 3 m's and you take 3 m's away, then that means you have nothing left. And this again results in no solution. Let's take a look at the next section. Identifying the rate of change, known as the slope, and the y-intercept when given a linear equation. The slope is always the coefficient of x. And the y-intercept is always the constant. So knowing those rules, when we look at this statement here, y equals 7 minus 2x, we see that the x has a coefficient of -2. Therefore, the slope is -2. The constant is +7. In question number 8, the x has no coefficient number. Anytime your coefficient is invisible, the answer is 1. The y-intercept this time is -5. And for number 9, our rate of change, our coefficient of x, is 4/7. Notice I'm not writing an x here. X is not the slope, just the coefficient is. The y-intercept is -8. They ask you to describe in words how to find the y-intercept when all you're given is the linear equation. So the first rule is it has to be written in y equals mx plus b form. So I'm going to say when written in y equals mx plus b form, or you could say when written in slope-intercept form, either one is acceptable. When it's written in this order, when written in y equals mx plus b form, the y-intercept is the constant term. Now it's important that you say that it's written in this order, because if it's not written in that order, there's no shortcut of looking at the constant. The last 3 questions for this section ask you to find the rate of change. Remember, we do that by finding the change in y divided by the change in x. You might know it as y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label my points, x1 and y1, and x2 and y2. This helps me to put it in my giant subtraction fraction in the right order. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Use a calculator to compute. It can reduce the fraction for you, or you can do it on your own. Again, I'm going to perform the same sequence for the next question. y2 minus y1. Notice there are 2 minuses in a row here. The formula has its own subtraction sign, and sometimes the numbers have their own negative signs. And now we need x2 minus x1. In this case, we're going to get a 0 in our denominator. And in our numerator, we're going to get a 4. Anytime your answer has a 0 in it, you need to go one step further. A 0 in the denominator is different than a 0 in the numerator. Dividing by 0 is impossible. So we call this solution undefined. For the last problem here, y2 is 7, y1 is 7, x2 is -9, x1 is 4, and again, I get a 0 in my fraction. But a 0 in the numerator doesn't mean undefined. It means 0. If you're unsure whether it's undefined or 0, simply turn your calculator on, enter the fraction using a fraction button or using the division key, and when you press enter, if you get an error, that means undefined. And if you get something like number 12, you know the answer is 0. So you can always use your calculator to check, but never write error as your answer. It's undefined, or no slope. All right, the third section asks you to graph some linear equations. Now you can make a table, or you can follow the slope-intercept shortcut, which is you begin at the y-intercept of +4, and you move using the slope number. Now remember, slope is a fraction. It's a ratio of the change in y over the change in x. And if you don't have a fraction, you need to put a 1 underneath. So from my initial point, starting here, I'm going to move down 3, 1, 2, 3, and write +1. So the change in y is down 3, and the change in x is 1. The change in y is 3, the change in x is 1. And I can repeat this as many times as I fit on the graph. Additionally, I can also reverse it. Instead of -3 and +1, I can move +3 and -1. And that would draw the upper half of my line. Once you have drawn as many points as you can, you connect them using a straight edge, and you draw arrows on each end. Let's start with number 14. The y-intercept is +1. Graph your first point at +1. The slope is 2/3. So the change along the y-axis is +2. The change along the x-axis is +3. 1, 2, 3. Draw a point. You don't need to draw these little counting dots, but you might find them helpful to use. Change in y is 2. Change in x is 3. Draw a point. Up 2 over 3. Up 2 over 3. If you'd like, you can reverse both of these signs and draw the other half of the line. Down 2, left 3. Down 2, left 3. Down 2, left 3. All right, the last one doesn't have a constant. And if the constant is missing, it's 0. If the rate of change numbers are missing, they're 1s. So I'm going to start at 0, and the change in y is 2, and the change in x is 1. So +2 on the y, +1 on the x. Up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. To draw the second half of the line, you reverse both the signs. Down 2, left 1. Down 2, left 1. And there's our line. For the second half of this box, you're going to write the y equals mx plus b equation. Write the equation containing these slopes and y-intercepts. So all you need to do is put the slope in the coefficient position and the y-intercept in the constant position. So for us, that results in 5x minus 2. Now be careful, I'm trying to trick you here. The slope is 8, so the 8 goes with the x. The y-intercept is the constant at the end. Feel free to reverse these sentences. as long as the 8 is the coefficient of x. You could reverse this one as well. And be careful of the signs. For the last one here, the slope is -2/5. That gets the x. And the y-intercept is -7. For the last box of the homework, you're asked to match an equation to a graph. When looking at your graphs, you're going to want to find some perfect corner points, like here and here. By finding those perfect corner points, you're able to find the slope a bit better. So first, let's look at some basics. This line is going uphill, so it needs a positive slope. We also see that it touches the y-axis at 3, so it needs a y-intercept of 3. So I'm looking for something with a positive slope, so that's out. I'm looking for something that crosses the y-axis at +3, so that's out. This has a negative slope, that's why it's wrong. This has a -2 y-intercept, and that's why it's wrong. So this must be the right answer. We can double check by counting our slope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. That makes sense. Let's do the same thing for number 20. Find a perfect corner point, and another perfect corner point, and maybe even another perfect corner point. It looks like this line is going downhill, so we need a negative slope. Let's see if we can cancel anything already. Well, it looks like this one would be wrong then. I also see it has a y-intercept of +4. So that means this one must be wrong. So again, this has the wrong slope, that one has the wrong y-intercept. This is the only right answer. Now this one is a special line. And it's special because it is horizontal. This is 0 fun. This is 0 fun, right? So we have a slope of 0. That means in our equation, the slope coefficient would be 0, or no x's at all. No x's at all. Now we need to observe where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses at -1. That makes A our answer. You cannot have a sentence with a y and an x unless it is a diagonal line. And this is not a diagonal graph. Number C is wrong because number C is stating that it's an x-only statement, which means that it would have an undefined slope, or a vertical line. And that concludes homework number 9.